Ladies and gentlemen, if I could have your attention for a second, we're trying to get everyone to their seats. I get paid by the hour, and I don't want to run up too big of a tab, so please come into the dining hall.
Yeah, what he said. Good evening and welcome to the Milwaukee Jewish Federation's Major Donor Appreciation Dinner. My name is Michael Grinker, and I am honored to be co-chairing tonight's event with my wife Sharon and Howard Frankenthal and Janie Skadron. We are grateful to all of you for being here tonight and for your inspiring participation in the Federation's annual campaign and Israel Emergency Fund this past year. We joined together here last year, just days after October 7th, in shock and pain. 1 year later, the daily reminders of the challenges we face as Jews remain, and hence the importance of gathering together, like we have tonight, to engage with each other and renew our understanding of our community's needs and determine how we will fulfill them together. Thank you for being here tonight and for continuing to serve as communal and philanthropic role models.
Just as we support one another, we provide vital support to Jews in Wisconsin, in Israel, and around the world. The leaders here tonight have made gifts that provide hope, safety, and support to millions. Your collective generosity fuels our community, and so much of what we are able to do is simply because of all of you who are here tonight in this room. Your outstanding kindness ensures our local and global Jewish community is cared for and can flourish for generations. Together, we are creating an impact on Jewish life at a scale that fosters real change. We feel fortunate to be part of such a compassionate group of people who care deeply for our shared past, present, and future.
You respond whenever you are asked, whenever you are needed. Through our steadfast support of Federation's annual campaign, you fund our community's most valued programs and organizations. You create a safety net that benefits children, families, and seniors. In times of crisis, you are ready to step up to the call. Your partnership has ensured Federation could immediately respond to the growing security needs across the state and address the spiraling anti-Semitism that is plaguing our communities. You take action. You make it possible for Federation to do its work better and more efficiently because you truly understand how your gift transforms lives.
Together as one, our collective philanthropy empowers Federation to both save and change lives every single day. The resources of our community members receive, in turn, empower them to live more Jewishly, more safely, more joyfully. Through Federation, we are here for one another. The beauty of collective giving is that we are able to do more good together than any of us can do on our own. What an amazing group of leaders we have present tonight. I am so inspired by each of you and the passion you have for making the world a better place for Jews everywhere. Tonight is a celebration we have accomplished and will continue to accomplish together. Now, please welcome Rabbi Josh Herman, Executive Director of Hillel Milwaukee, who will lead us in the Hamotzi and a moment of Jewish learning.
Good evening, everyone. I don't think I have to tell many of you that this is an interesting time to be a Hillel director. Not long after October 7th, somebody, meaning to be very, very kind, said to me, you know, I see what you're doing for our students, and, you know, I want you to know that I think God put you in this place at this time for a reason. And I said, thank you very much, but I don't know what I did so wrong to deserve it. But I will say there are moments in which we're helping students navigate the really challenging climate on campus, where there is sort of a moment for pause and a moment for gratitude, and certainly moments to feel really appreciated. And like many who work with young people, sometimes it comes from the young people themselves. Sometimes they share openly or sort of in their own ways how much it means to them to have the community that we've built at Hillel. But as a relatively new parent myself, some of the most sort of gratifying moments come from the conversations that I have with parents. We have a lot of local kids at Hillel Milwaukee, but more and more we're seeing students as we expand our outreach to different schools of kids that come from California and New York and North Carolina and all over the country, even some from Israel, that come and study here in Milwaukee and find their home at Hillel Milwaukee. And every once in a while, I'm lucky enough to make the connection with their parents and hear from them. And I start to realize that in such a challenging time, as a parent, it must be a real challenge to think about what's the community that I'm going to entrust with the well-being of my child as they go to not only get a degree to advance their career, but in our culture to become a grown-up, to find themselves and to decide what kind of Jewish life they're going to lead. And interestingly enough, actually, the ancient rabbis in the Talmud sort of related to this exact question. And there's a passage in which they ask, what is it that a city must have in order for a Talmid Chacham, for a student to be able to, or to be allowed to go and study there? And they give a number of things. They give a list of 10 things. Some of them are a little bit less relevant to our community, and maybe a good thing. We don't actually have a court with the authority to flog and punish those who don't follow its rulings. But many of them add up to sort of a laundry list of what a Jewish community should be. Things like it should have B'tei Knesset, it should have synagogues, it should have a place in which you can find a connection to your fellow Jews and also a connection to God. It should have schools for young children, because college is a time in which you think that everybody is between the ages of 18 and 21, but it's actually very healthy to be in a community that has a future, that has another generation that they're educating. And actually, one of the items on this list that Maimonides picks up on when he wrote his famous Code of Jewish Law is that one of these communities, one of the things that they must have is they must actually have a kupat tzedakah. They must have some kind of philanthropic entity that allocates its resources for the benefit of the community and for the benefit of the poor, according to certain rules and regulations and so on and so forth. And I thought about this text when I thought about the role that Federation and the role that all of you have in helping me do what I try to do, and my team tried to do what we try to do, which is to build a supportive and nurturing community of Jewish life and learning for all of the college students here in Milwaukee. Because I think to these conversations that I have with the parents and realize that they can trust us with their precious children, not only because they're going to get a great education at one of the 11 area institutions that we work with, but they have the infrastructure of a committed and vibrant Jewish community that will be there to support their children. That they know, because we are connected to Federation and because we are connected to all that Federation is connected with, that if their child has a mental health need, they've got Jewish Family Services here. They know that if there's a security issue on campus, that Josh Martinson and Ari Friedman are going to be right next to us as we lead those students to safety. They know that if the university is not behaving according to the way they should when there's anti-Semitism on campus, that Miriam is going to be there with me when we talk to those administrators and call them to task for not meeting their obligations to their students. And the list goes on and on and on. And that these students are learning what it means to be an adult and learning what it means to be a Jewish adult in the context of this community And I don't think there's much of a greater gift than I, as a Hillel director, could really give them, other than to connect them deeper to our community and to realize that this is a model of what a committed Jewish life is. Because when Maimonides relates to this text in the Talmud, he says that you won't ever see a Jewish community that doesn't have some kind of organized tzedakah. That just as you pass a village and you see that there are steeples and you know that there are Christians there, and you pass another village and you see that there are minarets and you know there are mosques, there's no architectural identifier to a Jewish community. But what you do know is that there is going to be a group of committed people who make sure that everyone gets what they need, that everyone looks out for each other, and that we support one another as a community. And that's, I think, the work that we're doing here today. That's the work that Federation and our partnership with Federation allows us to do at Hillel. And that's the work that we're hoping to teach these students that it's their responsibility to do once they get their degrees and go out into the world and build their own Jewish communities of the future. And so I'm very grateful for the opportunity to partner with all of you in this incredibly holy work, and very grateful to be here this evening. And so before we continue with anything else, we'll share a moment of gratitude for the delicious meal we are about to eat. So I think you all have some bread on the table if you'd like to grab one. And we'll join together and say, Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam hamotzi lechem min haaretz. Blessed are you, Adonai, our God, ruler of the universe, who brings forth bread from the earth. Amen. B'teavon, enjoy your meal, and the program will continue shortly.
Hi, everybody. Hi. So great to see everybody tonight. It's been so fun catching up with so many of you. So thank you all for being here. I'm Judy Corin, and this is my inaugural campaign event as the Federation's board chair. And I really couldn't think of a more inspiring group to embark on this journey with. First, I just want to say a thank you to Rabbi Herman. Josh, where are you? Oh, he went home. Josh, thank you. No, he really is so inspiring, and I've gotten to know him lately, and those kids are so lucky to have him, and I just wanted to let him and all of you know that. I wanted to also thank Mike and Sharon, Howard, and Janie for being our co-chairs tonight. Thank you guys so much. Serving as the Federation's campaign chair for 3 years was one of the most significant experiences of my life. And all of you were instrumental in making that role so meaningful for me. During that period, which part of it was during the height of the COVID pandemic, we rose to the challenge and we realized our most successful campaign in recent history. This past year, when I led the Israel Emergency Fund, along with Bruce Arbit, Jody Habasinikin, and Craig Zetley, again, you stepped up with remarkable generosity. We've walked this path united in purpose for years, and we know firsthand the power of what we can achieve together. This community has gone above and beyond to care for the Jewish people. And while we've faced truly unprecedented crises in recent years, this moment stands apart. It's unlike anything I've ever seen. It's unlike anything most of us, including my 94-year-old father, have experienced. From anti-Semitism to October 7th, chaos on college campuses, and of course the ongoing war in Israel. The weight of this moment is more palpable, it's more profound. The work the Federation is doing is different also. Our core focus has had to shift. What is not different, though, is the call to action. What is not different is you being here, us, together as one, doing what it will take in these most difficult of times, and I'm so grateful for that. Tonight, you will hear more about this year's theme, As One. Only together as one can we ensure that the Federation can respond to the ever-increasing demands we are facing, continue fighting for the release of the hostages, combat the sharp increases in anti-Semitism, and address the soaring security costs to keep our communities safe. Tonight marks the pivotal launch of the Federation's 2025 annual campaign, and we look to you, our most generous donors, to lead the way. In the wake of October 7th, your early and wholehearted support is crucial as we streamline the campaign and allocate funds swiftly to our partners for more effective community planning. Time and time again, you've demonstrated the strength and power of our community. In the coming year, we will continue to provide leadership and support that drives us forward. From the bottom of my heart, I thank you for your unwavering commitment. I'm also proud to be a part of this community. Together, we will rise to meet the challenges we face, and we will ensure a brighter future for all of us. And now I want to introduce, please join me in welcoming Miriam Rosenzweig, our wonderful CEO, my new partner in crime. She works so very hard for all of us, and she's made my transition so very smooth. Oi, poo, poo, poo.
Thank you, Judy. Before I start, I have to say I think I spend too much time talking about anti-Semitism because I sat down at the table and it said Miriam Rosenzweig, chicken, and I thought it was a slur. But I didn't report it, we're okay. Thank you all for being here tonight. This is my 6th Major Gifts dinner with this community. My first Major Gifts event in 2019, we didn't know that there was a pandemic coming just a few months later. The next 2 were on Zoom. The next one was 22 when we were deep into responding to the war in Ukraine. And of course, last year, my 5th year, it was just 3 days after October 7th, 1 day after our community gathering. And I think it's significant for me to have this sort of the marker. You have like Major Gifts event and Rosh Hashanah, it's the beginning of the year. Because it's this campaign that allows us to do everything else that we're going to talk about, everything else that we do. And I'm really happy to be here talking and being able to start with gratitude and not with all the difficult stuff. And so I want to ground us. Now this is going to shock you, but I'm going to start with our mission, right? Our mission doesn't change. We take care of the needs of the Jewish people, and we build a vibrant Jewish future in Milwaukee, Israel, and around the world. It's not specific. It says needs. It doesn't define them. It says vibrant Jewish future. It doesn't say what that looks like. Because our job is to respond to the needs and the most urgent needs as they are each year, each generation. And what it takes to have a vibrant Jewish future changes. You're going to hear me talk about security a lot this year, because security is big and it's expensive. But let me tell you, if we double the number of kids who went to Ghana Me and Jewish Beginning, and double the number of kids going to Jewish summer camp, our community would be more secure. Our mission actually has a second part to it where it defines the 3 pillars of how we do this work: philanthropy, community leadership, and global Jewry. Philanthropy, this is where all of us come in. The fact that we have an annual campaign and that we've had an annual campaign for 100 years allows us to respond. We didn't build the Milwaukee Jewish Federation's ability to respond on the morning of October 7th. It was built in October of 1990, in October of 1980, and 70, and 60, and 50 before us. The ability to be able to respond is dependent on having our agencies who are able to do their work. But that's not all we do. We do community leadership. We respond with what is most important at that time. And today, a lot of that revolves around responding to anti-Semitism and security. And it includes professionals and board members and chairs and programs and agencies, and it takes all of us to move the needle on what it means to be Jewish today in Milwaukee. And then it talks about global Jewry, because being Jewish is a team sport. You can't do it alone. It just doesn't work. And part of being Jewish is knowing that whether it's in Milwaukee or if it's in Wisconsin, we're not going to leave someone behind. But it doesn't matter whether they're in Ukraine or in Israel or in the next place that we're going to have to respond to. That's what being Jewish is about. I just want to tell you, if I were to take a snapshot, this was my day. I started off writing a letter to UWM. Steve, I was doing my job. I then went to Bader Philanthropies that were hosting a symposium on working with Arab Israelis on crime. And Bader Philanthropies is very involved in it. And our federation got involved in this work about 2 years ago when we started giving a grant to this program. I was then at the Milwaukee Journal Sentinel to do a session with the editorial board on what is anti-Semitism, and noting that only Urban Milwaukee called the mural anti-Semitic. On the way here, somebody called me and said, I saw police outside of the JCC, and I called Ari and he said, it wasn't us, right? Good news. And now I get to be with you. And to me, that describes the work of the Federation. Because right now we have 3 priorities. Priority number 1, the safety and security of a Jewish community. There's no question that that is how we wake up in the morning, that's our job, and it's too big for any one agency to do alone. It's only something that you can do as a community. On October 6th, our budget for security was $364,000, although I saw yesterday it was $370,000, so let's go with $370,000. We started this year with a budget of $2.5 million for Wisconsin. That's not something any one agency can do alone. It's not even something that we can do. So our first job is to reduce the costs, and we've opened an LLC, and we're working on it, and all the good stuff that we're doing. Our second job is to make sure that anti-Semitism and security is not the only experience of being Jewish. It's making sure that kids go to camp. It's making sure that our elderly have a place in which to live with dignity. It's everything else that our agencies do. And then our third priority is to stay grounded in a sea of emotion. And there's a lot of emotion. And it comes up every week. And sometimes it's about politics, and sometimes it's about how we respond or don't respond. And it's our job to say, we have to do what's right. And our North Star is the first 2 jobs that we have. What's going to help us make sure that we're secure, and that that's not only a part of being Jewish. And all of that happens because of the annual campaign. This year and every year before it. So I want to say thank you for what you've given in the past, for what you've done, for allowing us to stand on the shoulders of giants to get to this moment and meet the moment today, tomorrow, always. I also want to take this moment, first of all, to thank the Federation team. As usual, I came in and I didn't even know what room this was in, and so you did a great job. And it's noted that I never thank Matt, and so because this is about thanking donors, and he allows us to make the incredibly generous gift that we do, I want to thank Matt. Because it's not only the generosity of the annual campaign, but it allows all of us, or at least me, to be here every day. Thank you so much. I now want to invite out Julie. Where's Julie? I wasn't told to introduce her, but Julie's unbelievable. Can we just give her a round of applause? She does such a great job of leading the professionals, the lay leaders, the volunteers, and keeping us moving, and she does it while being fabulous. So,
thank you, Miriam. So I have the distinct pleasure of introducing tonight's speaker. I was lucky to be a Shalom Hartman Fellow back in 2019 when I was the Hillel director of Hillel Milwaukee. And let me just say, I'm really glad Josh Sherman's in that job right now. You all are in for a treat tonight because Yehuda is an amazing educator who is able to take complex issues and make them very digestible. Dr. Yehuda Kurtzer is the president of the Shalom Hartman Institute and a leading thinker on the essential questions facing contemporary Jewish life. His primary focus is on issues of Jewish peoplehood and Zionism, the relationship between history and memory, and questions of leadership and change in the Jewish community. Dr. Kurtzer is the author of Shuva, The Future of the Jewish Past, the co-editor of the New Jewish Canon, the host of Identity Crisis podcast that I just learned he started during COVID, and the author of dozens of articles and essays about contemporary Jewish life. As president of the Shalom Hartman Institute and formerly as founding president of Shalom Hartman Institute North America, Dr. Kurtzer has helped lead the Institute's rapid growth as a leading research and educational center for the leadership of the Jewish community and as a trusted voice for thought leadership on the questions of the day. Dr. Kurtzer is trained as a scholar of ancient Judaism and rabbinics with a doctorate in Jewish studies from Harvard University, and previously served as a member of the faculty at Brandeis University, where he held the inaugural chair in Jewish communal innovation. So please give a warm welcome to my friend, Dr. Yehuda Kurtzer.
Good evening, everyone. Thank you so much for having me here tonight. I'm not of this community, obviously, but I think this is okay for me to actually thank you for what you do for the Jewish people. The work that you do obviously strengthens this particular Jewish community, but as everyone has spoken about, federations contribute in shaping the strength and vitality of the Jewish people wherever we are. So even as a New York Jew, I'm grateful for the leadership of the Milwaukee Jewish community. This past year has been impossible, and the work has been really hard for those of us who work on the professional side of the Jewish community, but also for many of you as lay leaders. Unfortunately, I think my job here tonight is to make it a little bit harder. I think at least some of you have finished eating, and that's probably a good head start. When we as Jews are forced by circumstance to live in the present, it becomes really hard for us to think about the future. A lot of our work as professionals, and my work at the Hartman Institute, is to be responsible to think on behalf of our community about the challenges that the future holds. I felt something a little bit sad, and I'm sure you felt this way, Miriam, in your remarks and in the work, of how much time we have to spend as a Jewish community focusing on issues like security, preserving and protecting our standing at the risk of, at the cost of, the investments we might be making in building a more vital and vibrant Jewish community. When you have to spend your time trying to stay alive, you spend less time than you want to on questions of how to thrive. This has felt like one of the major indignities that we as Jews and as Jewish leaders have had to struggle with in the past year. Not only have we been drawn by the events of October 7th and the relentless news cycle every day since, not only are we drawn into responding to those tragedies on a human level, experiencing them, feeling them, but also responding to them politically, processing them, putting out messages to our community to help explain what's taking place. But we also get hampered by that responsibility from the work of the future because of this business of triage. I've never felt more in my work over the course of this year, something like 150 talks like this, that the work was simply triage. And I will say on a technical level, the hard thing has been that we did a prep call. Julie, when was it? 3 months ago? And I think I may have said on the prep call, sure, I'll talk about that. But whatever's going to happen the morning of is probably going to have to feature into what we're talking about. So on a technical level, it's hard not only to be in the business of triage because it takes us away from doing work that we wish we were doing, but it also puts a lot of pressure on us as community leaders to be responding in real time on difficult issues. And we as a Jewish people, one of our strengths has been wisdom, our capacity to interpret the present on the basis of the past. And that's a really hard thing for us as Jewish leaders to have to do in constant real time. We're not actually supposed to be a real-time people. The Jewish people are a people of history, and we are a people of destiny. And one of the real deep risks is not just about our time or our attention span, but the fear of needing to focus on such of these issues in real time not only is a distraction from the work of building the future, but also feels like it's not great for cultivating moral imagination. One of the losses I felt of this past year is the loss of some amount of agency. Am I allowed to think about something on my own, or must I constantly be reacting to what's taking place in the news cycle? David Hartman, a philosopher in Jerusalem, the founder of the institute that I now lead, has one of his most famous essays was written during the first Lebanon War in 1982-1983. And the essay was provocatively titled Auschwitz or Sinai. And the premise of the essay was that we as the Jewish people in modernity, at the time only 35, 40 years after the Shoah, have a choice in how we tell our story and what kind of Jewish people we are. And the premise of Hartman's argument was, of course we came out of Auschwitz, but if we are entirely the people of Auschwitz, we are always thinking of ourselves as victims. We are always thinking of ourselves as passive victims of history. We are constantly focused on our vulnerability, and we lose the ability to shape and define what Jewishness should mean in the future. He says we have a different template in our tradition, which is to be the Jews of Sinai, those who stood at the foot of a mountain and committed to be in relationship with God and with our future, where we undertook moral and political responsibility for our future and decided that our future was going to be shaped by our commitment to our destiny rather than simply the morality of survival. Hartman provocatively asked the Jewish people in the early 80s, amidst a war, how do we make sure we don't fall into the trap of having our moral imagination imprisoned by the constant business of reacting, responding, victimhood, and vulnerability? 20 years after that, Aaron Barak who was at the time the Chief Justice of the Israeli Supreme Court, noticed a different way in which the war like the one that Israel is facing today was doing the same thing on our society. And this, by the way, happened in America well before October 7th, after 9/11. Aaron Barak, as the Chief Justice of the Supreme Court, wrote a piece, I think it was in the Yale Law Review, in which he talked about one of the ways that terrorism crushes our liberal democratic societies, because it not only takes victims, terrorists take victims, but what it does also is that we, liberal democratic societies, start cracking down on the very civil liberties that make us liberal democratic societies. It's a double-edged victory for terror. And that happened in America after 9/11, and it's happening in Israel over the past year. And so we are put in this position by others, where we lose our agency to build the societies that we want by virtue of the fact that they have created this culture that makes us victims and vulnerable. It terrifies me to think about what happens to our Jewish young people when, instead of feeling as though belonging and participating in Jewish life connects them to the world around them, makes them greater citizens, when they feel, almost by accident of these realities, that to go to a Jewish institution requires them to enter into a fortress. That is one of the terrifying consequences of something that we didn't create, something that was done to us. feels very heavy today in light of the news cycle. We were sitting together and looking at the red alerts going on over the past hour in parts of Israel, where we are, actually a lot of Israel, where we are again, it feels like post-traumatic response of remembering those perilous first few hours when we heard the news around October 7th. And so anything we're going to continue to talk about tonight has to be informed not just by the question of what does it mean to look forward, but how do we actually get through this complicated time, the story of which is not completely written. I want to do two things with you tonight. The first is I want to offer a framework to maybe help put together some of the events of the past 11 months. The charge that I was asked to come here tonight was to talk about almost a year since October 7th, and to make sense a little bit of all of the events of the past year, and maybe help us understand what it's going to take to continue to work through it. But I also want to offer something of a charge, not just how we understand the past year, but what we are going to need to do as Jewish communities, and all of you and all of us as Jewish leaders, to take hold of the process of interpreting this and taking hold of our moral agency again to shape a Jewish future. About a year and a half ago, so this was, I guess, in spring of 2023, which feels like 10 years ago, it was a great essay written, short piece in Times of Israel, written by a professor at Berkeley, Ron Hassner, in which he, as a thought experiment leading up to Israel at 75, he wrote a short piece on America at 75. What was going on in America as it approached its 75th year? It was a great little thought exercise, and two things stood out to me as really powerful analogies to what Israel was struggling with. One of which was, or maybe just I'll focus on one, the key thing he noted was that America by the year, I'll say two, sorry. America by year 75 had only 1/3 of its constitution written. Interesting, right? We tend to think of the Constitution as being essential to the American founding, but only 1/3 of what we have as the Constitution today was written by the 75th year. And perhaps more importantly, by year 75 of America, America had spent most of its time and energy fighting wars against external enemies and failing to resolve the underlying tension that it needed to fix in order to flourish. And that's a terrifying analogy, because it sounds familiar, actually, to the state of Israel as well, which has spent much of its 75 years fighting external enemies, and in many ways failing to resolve the democratic questions, the questions around the Palestinians, that continue to percolate within the context of Israeli society. And what underlies that metaphor and that analogy is an even more terrifying analogy, which is that America was on the verge of a civil war. And that it was only following the Civil War that America was able to create a reconciliation that didn't solve problems of racism in America, but at least had foregrounded them so significantly that America following the Civil War could then flourish as it did for the next 150 years. I woke up this morning and was watching the news. I finally kind of put it together. Maybe these past 18 months have not been a sequence of isolated catastrophic events, but maybe we are living in the Jewish people's version of a civil war. Maybe all of these different events comprise a complicated moment in the history of the State of Israel and in the history of our relationship to the State of Israel, which represent a constellation of questions where Israel and we as the people who love it are being forced to reckon with what it is really about. Maybe these are not one war, but actually I can count 5. Prior to October 7th, you will remember that the conversation everywhere was about the democracy protests in Israel, where something on the neighborhood of 63% of Israelis had taken to the streets at one point or another to insist that the overreaches that were being proposed around the judicial reform in Israel were a threat to Israel's democracy. If 63% of the people are out there, and as we know, you cannot get 63% of Israelis to agree if it's raining, if that's already the case, something has percolated in a deep way that requires a constitutional process to fix. That war was already starting within Israeli society prior to October 7th. On October 7th, we saw the opening of the front of the war between Israel and Hamas in Gaza, which Israel had effectively postponed for 20 years through failed policies, hoping it would resolve itself, only to discover Hamas was way more powerful and intelligent than anyone had predicted, and that the strategy of containment had failed. Since October 7th, we've seen the emergence of a second front in this war, which is in the West Bank, and even more problematically, really problematically, between Jewish citizens and Palestinian citizens of Israel, who have been caught up with tremendous racism and oftentimes state violence because they are ethnically the same people who Israel is at war with. This is an immensely dangerous moment for Israel as a democracy if 20% of its population get grouped in with those who are ethnically also Palestinian, but not actually part of the same society. The fourth, of course, is the war that is waging now. It's a myth to say that the war started in the last couple of days. The war with Hezbollah has been going on for years. It was really launched on October 8th in solidarity with the people of Hamas. And what we're seeing in the last couple of days is the intensification of a war that could go on much longer and be far bloodier, both on the Hezbollah Lebanese side, but also for Israeli society for longer than we can anticipate, and which isn't merely about Hezbollah. It's actually a proxy war that reflects the question of Israel's long-term standing in the region. And the fifth site of this war that we are experiencing is the battle here in the diaspora, but in particular in America, for Israel's standing in the West. Is Israel going to be considered one of the good countries of the West, or is it going to be attacked as one of the pariah states? For us as Jews, we are amidst a battle of how and whether Israel will continue to be a central force in American Jewish identity as it has been for the past 75 years. Now, all of these are different stories. All of these are different wars. It doesn't help us to understand the particular dynamics of any of them to pretend that they are one thing. But if you have felt like me whiplash over the past 11 months by the news cycle, where it's a little bit like, maybe whiplash is not the right metaphor, maybe it's, you know, the carnival game whack-a-mole, right? Once you swing over here and something else pops up over there, maybe it would be helpful for us to think as a community that these are not different events that require different strategies, which is true, but maybe we are actually living in a bigger and more pivotal moment in Jewish history than we had anticipated. Because all of these wars are going to require different strategies, but maybe we are witnessing and living through a transformative moment in our people's history that is requiring us not merely to play a game of whack-a-mole, but to think in a more forward-looking way about what we want to see on the other side of this story. Because the truth is, I think all of these are winnable. I think all of them are winnable. Doesn't mean all of them aren't costly, but all of them are winnable. And a good, healthy society, and I include the Jewish people as that, should not only be spending our time asking, what does it mean to win this war? We should be asking, what world are we preparing to build on the other end? So here's the charge that I want to give you tonight. The difficulty is to hear a story which says that these are linked pieces as part of the moment of Jewish history in which we live. That's the difficult challenge, and the real difficulty is having to live through this. It is taxing so much of us, politically and emotionally and philanthropically. It's a blessing that this federation and many others, as I was hearing tonight, did not sacrifice our annual campaigns to respond to the emergency campaigns, but every single federation director who I spoke to last October, and it was a lot of them, were worried exactly about that. We're going to give all our money to respond to this emergency, and we're not going to be able to keep the doors open. So it's extraordinary what we've been able to do as a Jewish community, but it drags on. And folks, we may be in for this for quite a bit of time longer. I want to ask us tonight, not just what does it take to fight these wars. Israel has an IDF, and it's extraordinary. We have great American Jewish leaders who are holding up our institutions, protecting our kids, building flourishing Jewish life on campus. I think the wars are winnable. But I want to ask a different question, which is, what will it take of us to be the Jewish people we want to be once this dust has cleared? I want to suggest a few things. First, I think we, as the Jewish people, have to be really careful in moments like this, not only to reject that victim mentality that I quoted before from David Hartman, to not get into that mindset as a people that we are basically victims, to not fall trap morally and politically to constantly fixating our own vulnerability. It's not true, by the way, but it also is not healthy. And on the flip side of it, we have to be really careful as a community, as a people, to not flatten the people we see on the other side of any of these wars. This is a big risk, as I alluded to before, in Israel. If the state of Israel, while fighting Hamas in Gaza, cannot also figure out a future for the relationship with Palestinians that are not Hamas, it will make this situation far worse. And that's true for us as well. Many of us American Jews felt post-October 7th let down by our allies. Why didn't they show up for us? But the more we get stuck in a trap of a world where we think either you are my friend or you are my enemy, we will have fewer and fewer friends. It's an approach that is born out of victimhood and vulnerability, but it will weaken the condition of the Jewish people. Secondly, how do we as a Jewish people here in America, and this is hard to hear, how do we maintain our critical faculties and our critical posture to be able to both be supportive of Israel during a time like this, but capable of parsing the difference between supporting Israel and supporting everything that the state of Israel does? This is a hard place to be. It's been a lot of pressure on us as Jewish leaders to support the war, to identify it as a just war. But I don't know, does that mean I have to pretend that I think every strategic decision is right? Does it mean I can't listen to the now hundreds of thousands of Israelis who have sent their children to war and who express their own dissent about the war? Can we retrieve our critical sensibilities in a moment like this to be the complicated Jewish people that we are? Maybe more important on that front is, how do we make sure that the wars do not pull apart our communities? There's been a lot of rupture in Jewish life over the past year. Who said the right thing at the right time? Who said the wrong thing at the wrong time? I hear around the country that families are getting torn apart by this. How do we prevent that from happening? Next week, 2 weeks, 3 weeks, Yom Kippur. My favorite line in the whole Yom Kippur service, you blink and you miss it, is right at the beginning of Kol Nidre. We say this crazy line, which is, Anu matirin lehitpalel ima havaryanim. We give ourselves permission to pray with sinners. Very weird thing to say at Yom Kippur when everyone's atoning for their sins. But you know, it means we know we all hold grudges. And we're asking of ourselves to enter into a community together with people we think are wrong. and to be willing to stand in community sometimes with people who we think are wrong. Can we do some work to ensure, even as we think we are right, to make sure that this doesn't tear apart our people and our community? And can we, throughout this period of time, while Israel has to fight some existential wars, while we have to fight for our safety and our dignity as American Jews, can we insist, nevertheless, that the commitments that have animated a strong American Jewry for the last 100 years, like believing in liberal democracy, or the commitment that has animated the Jewish people for thousands of years, which is that we seek to be the children of Aaron, loving peace and pursuing peace, that those are our long-term commitments. That we as a Jewish people are not supposed to be a people who is hijacked to and captive to history. That we as a people do not want to dwell in a language of victimhood and vulnerability. That we do not want to accept that wars that we did not start characterize who we are as a people. That we want to speak the same language of justice as being now weaponized against the story of the Jewish people. Instead of giving up on the ideas of justice and peace and democracy, how do we find a way to amplify that conversation precisely in this complicated moment of Jewish history? Because ultimately, history will look back on us as the Jewish people not only with the prism of, did we win the war? What Jewish history will look back on is what ways did we perpetuate the great, noble, and visionary Jewish ideas that made the Jewish people exceptional throughout our history. I want to conclude with this. None of us, get to choose what era of Jewish history we are born into. You can blame your parents, you can blame your grandparents. We don't get to choose the era of Jewish history we are born into, which means we don't get to choose the challenges that we face as a Jewish people. The only thing we have choice over is what Jews we choose to be in the period of Jewish history that we're in. I want to ask us tonight, knowing that so much of our reserves of energy are going to have to be devoted to the resilience of maintaining strength during this period of time, that so much of our energies, philanthropically and politically, are going to be dedicated towards making ourselves safe, towards helping the IDF win, towards competing in the marketplace of ideas right now, which is a messy and dangerous one in America. I know most of our energy is there, but something has to remain for us to continue to invest in that story of what world we as the Jewish people are seeking to build. A world, ultimately, that we want to see characterized for ourselves, for the Jewish people and the world, that is guided by justice, democracy, and peace. Thank you very much. I think if there's still time in the schedule, I'm happy to take a few questions. What's that? If you have to ask, you might be it. The question is, who's Abe Lincoln? Look, the thing that's so interesting in looking at the analogy, and I find it quite painful right now in Israeli society that it doesn't quite exist, is that one of the things that was most extraordinary about Lincoln's leadership was precisely the consciousness around what are you going to need to do to put the pieces back together once the war is over, and what are you going to be willing to do in that moment. It's very clear Lincoln was thinking about that throughout the war, and it guided a lot of the military decision making. I'm going to leave out commentary on Israeli leaders. But we as American Jews have to ask a similar version of that question right now in our own community, right? Knowing that it's one thing to say, how do I protect my community right now? But it's another to say, how do I make sure I am constantly tending to and rebuilding those relationships that seem most vulnerable right now? So I don't know that it has to be a technical answer, it's this person, but it might be a virtue ethics answer. How do we as the Jewish people invest in that question that we ask of ourselves and to which we hold our leaders accountable? Go ahead, Miriam.
What gives you hope right now in Israel?
The question is, what gives me hope in Israel? I feel very blessed in my work to work with Israelis. It means that if I was working purely in an American Jewish institution, I think I would be more depressed because I would feel like I want certain things to look better, but I would feel more powerless to actually make it better. Back in May of 2021, in the explosion of violence in Israel, and the most dangerous and scary expression of that violence to me was in what are called the mixed cities, Jewish and Arab, which historically have really not had that kind of violence. And it was clear that there was a lot of just young people rage emerging in the mixed cities, and it made a lot of us very depressed about the future of shared society work. I work with Palestinian activists who work at the Hartman Institute, and they work on issues of shared society together with their Jewish peers. And those folks didn't get depressed. They got in their cars. They did the work, right? So anytime, right, it's like my colleague Rabbi David Rosen said, you lose an election, the people who change the world are the ones who get up the following morning, they don't geschrei on Facebook, they brush themselves off, and they get back to work. So, the famous Mr. Rogers line was, look for the helpers. It's not to me the helpers. It's actually look for the people who are doing stuff. And throughout that war, that work has continued. It does not dominate the headlines, and there's all sorts of reasons for that. One of the most powerful things I think we can do as Jewish communal leaders is to amplify those voices. Here are the courageous Israelis and Palestinians who are searching for a new future within the Green Line as part of Israeli democracy. Here are the folks who are doing the work to rebuild relationship between Jews and others. Here are the folks who are trying to activate a serious conversation on democracy in Israel. And by virtue of the fact that I get to speak to Israelis most days, that's the people who are going to give me hope. And hope is a tricky one. Hope is tricky. It's not optimism. Optimism is you think things are going to get better. You might be wrong, right? Actually, a Jewish optimist is a person who knows that things could get worse. Right. That's not it. It's not about naive optimism. It's actually about a constructive activity. Things could get worse. Question is, what am I doing when I wake up every day to build a different possible alternative for the future? So that, as simple as it is, looking outside of government, looking at the social sector, and looking at the folks who are losing now, but ultimately could be winning later on. One more question, if you have. Yes, sir.
So to your point about Kol Nidre,
yes.
Rabbi Cosgrove in his new book talks about meeting the next generation where they are. What is your advice for the conversations we're going to be having around our high holiday tables in the next few weeks?
Yeah.
The next generation.
What's that? Yeah. How do we engage a next generation of Jews on their own terms? Well, first of all, part of the message that I tried to share tonight is that we have to reclaim the version of the conversation that we want to have. Right? One of the things that pains me, I don't think that the Jewish community's response to this war has been wrong. In fact, I feel like I've tried to play a part in shaping it. But one of the things that pains me is when those who are critical of Israel can speak a language of justice, and those of us who are supportive of Israel speak more about justification. That's not wrong. The war may be justified. But if we are relinquishing the language of justice, we're giving over a tremendous amount of moral terrain that has always been considered essential to what we consider important to our Jewishness. In general, the place where I think it's possible to create conversation across difference is by moving people away from talking about the news and getting them to talk about their values, getting them to talk about their commitments. We ultimately know that we are hostage to algorithms and to the curation of information, which tells us that we're actually not even looking at the same news. I can't really talk to my in-laws anymore because they watch one news channel and I watch a different news channel, so we simply don't have the same information. But I do find ways to talk to my in-laws about what are the commitments that we share in common. And weirdly, when you're in a conversation about commitments and values, you can find common ground. Ultimately, even in families that are deeply divided about Israel, they ultimately share some very deep commitments about the importance of Jewish self-preservation, about a commitment to justice, to the moral character of the Jewish people. We just have different parties and processes through which we navigate or negotiate those commitments. It's kind of like getting us back to a core principle of shared moral language. And once somebody sees you for the sincerity of your commitments, it becomes possible to then negotiate the question of why it is that you see the world so differently from them. So I'd say I think our challenge around our tables and in our synagogues is a little less politics. By the way, good message in America right now too. You can be focused on winning, but Americans in general have to also be committed to the larger project of American democracy, which we're going to need to be resilient after the election also. You could wind up winning an election and continuing to perpetuate the polarization that's bringing us down. Right? So the work is to try to get to something bigger, to some shared bigger commitments, and then have some decent wine at the table so that you can take a sip while people are saying things to drive you crazy. Thanks very much, everybody.
Wow, that was so insightful. Can we give another round of applause to Dr. Yehuda Kistner? Can we please also give a round of applause to Steve Marcus for letting us time after time to use this beautiful room. We are now going to premiere Federation's 2025 campaign video, which showcases the many ways of fulfilling our mission in Milwaukee, in Israel, and around the world.
Imagine a world where Jewish life can flourish. A future where Israel lives in peace with its neighbors. A culture free from the darkness of hate and intolerance. A society where everyone's basic needs are met. This isn't a distant dream. It's a vision fueled by the unwavering spirit of the Jewish people, bound together by a powerful mission and a shared purpose. We can do anything when we do it together, as one. As one, we stand in solidarity with Israel and Ukraine. As one, we deliver humanitarian aid to the front lines. As one, we offer a helping hand and a shoulder to lean on. As one, we speak up against hate and intolerance. As one, we combat the rise in anti-Semitism. As one, we protect our homes, schools, and synagogues. And as one, we spark a lifelong passion for Jewish culture and traditions. The bright and hopeful future we envision cannot be achieved alone. Let's build it together. As one. Will you join us?
Hello again. I'm Tanya Arbet, and I'm thrilled to be serving as your 2025 campaign chair alongside with Susan Angel Miller. I was born in Kiev at the time when every person in the Soviet Union was forced to carry an internal passport. In my passport, line 5 said my nationality, Еврей, Jew. On my first day of school, the teacher said, "Oh, you are the Jew." And that was the same throughout my life. In college, and even at the first day of my job, the Jew had arrived. My parents chose not to emphasize that I was Jewish. They wanted to protect me. They wanted me to feel like everyone else, just a Soviet. The only problem was that everybody else around me knew that I was Jewish and treated me differently. From teachers at school who gave me lesser grades than A+ work, to the swim coach who made me take multiple showers because my skin was still dirty. To the parents of my classmates who asked not to invite me to their parties. When my son was born, it became important to me to learn about our heritage. But as you know, in the Soviet Union, it was literally a crime to practice Judaism. And I knew in my heart that I wanted my family to be different, that I wanted more, and I wanted to live. I don't know if I ever had the courage to leave, if not for the actions of the Milwaukee and other Jewish communities. When over 200,000 American Jews marched on Washington, D.C. to demand our freedom and the release of the Soviet Jews, the U.S. government heard you. Some of you who were at that fateful march are here tonight. And Soviet Union gave in. I got my exit permit. The next day, I was fired from my job. They took away my passport when we boarded the plane. I was a stateless refugee and literally homeless. This is a $100 bill. That was handed to me when we landed in New York by the JDC representative. This bill wasn't just money. It was magic. To someone who was scared, stateless, and homeless, it meant that someone, somewhere, cared about me and my family. You cared. It represented hope. It was everything I had at that moment. And it was everything I needed. I participated in the greatest homecoming in the world's history. Over 1 million Jews went to Israel, and 250,000 Jews came to the United States. It was only possible because of the generosity of our campaign and hundreds of others around North America. Jewish power comes from organizing. As a community, that's what we do when we join together, united as one. Throughout my 33 years living in Milwaukee, being part of the Jewish community, seeing firsthand and learning the impact of our collective gifts, I realized that giving money to the annual campaign is not only my duty, it's my honor. When we united in a Jewish community, together we can make Jewish dreams come true. Thank you.
Tanya and I know firsthand that resilience is about finding strength and purpose in the face of adversity. It's about transforming pain into growth. As many of you know, in the past 15 years, my family and I have experienced more than our share of tragedy and loss. We've experienced more than our share and many moments of shock, fear, and despair. Ron and I have felt vulnerable and unsure at times of how to live in a world we no longer recognized or wanted. It's because of these personal challenges and our shared Jewish history, though, that make what is happening today in Israel and on our college campuses so heartbreaking, and yet also feels so eerily familiar. In our collective Jewish history, trauma, and resilience, they are also very deeply intertwined. Our Jewish history has been marked by moments of great adversity over the past thousands of years, from slavery to the destruction of the temples, the expulsions from Spain and Portugal, the pogroms of Eastern Europe, and of course, the Holocaust. So many moments when the very existence of our people was at stake. So many moments when we all had to pull ourselves up to be resilient and to keep going. The events since October 7th have, for me, and I know for so many of you, been shocking and traumatic. Traumatic because the events have shattered they've shattered many of our actual life assumptions about how the world is supposed to work. That is the definition of trauma, when life assumptions are shattered. I get it. I remember the confusing jumble of emotions and the difficulty in coming to terms with a new unfathomable reality. And I've learned again and again the need to be intentional, to put one foot in front of the other, to integrate what happened into a new way of being. This means not only having faith in a better future, but doing the hard work to make it a reality. We are in a moment in our Jewish history, I believe, where we as a community must demonstrate our resilience and our ability to adapt.
In September 1941, there were 60,000 Jews living in Kiev. Almost 40,000 of them were massacred just in 2 days at Babi Yar. So when I see the sign that reads "From the river to the sea," or "by any means necessary" on a campus of UWM, I believe them. These threats feel real and sometimes scary in a world which we often don't recognize. Last year, our security cost was $365,000. This year, the budget is closer to $2 million and projected need to raise to $10 million over the next 5 years.
So at the major donor event last year on October 10th, I stood up here with Max, and we both saw the shock and pain in everyone's eyes, and we felt it in our own hearts. It's been an extremely challenging time, and there are still so many challenges ahead. We can't give up, though, and just like my family and I needed to do, we had to be intentional and determined and do the hard work of writing our own storage of courage and hope. We all as a community have that ability. The Milwaukee Jewish Federation's superpower, in my opinion, now more than ever, is being able to respond in crises like no other agency in Milwaukee can do on its own. I feel in every fiber of my being that the Federation is more relevant today than it has ever been in the last 30 years of me living in Milwaukee. Whereas the individual agencies we support specialize in programming and direct services, MJF focuses on the larger picture and future needs. We are planners. We are conveners. We are problem solvers. And we engage and develop future leaders and nurture a collaborative culture to ensure that Jewish life in Milwaukee and around the world not only survives but thrives. Why do I spend my time talking to donors? Why do both of us spend our time talking to donors and asking them to give generously? Because I want to look back and be proud that I did my part. That I did my part to sustain a healthy Jewish community and a vibrant future for not only my 24-year-old daughter, Rachel, who recently moved back to Milwaukee and is now working at the JCC, but also for my 28-year-old daughter, Sarah, and her new husband, Michael, who live in Tel Aviv.
We are counting on you, our major donors, to increase your giving during this time of crisis. Our goal is to close 75% of our campaign by end of December and to complete the 2025 campaign by the end of April. We must shorten the campaign cycle so that we can get the dollars in the hands of those who need it sooner and put more focus into community planning. The only way we can meet our goals is with you, our most committed donors.
When I look around this room, I feel confident that we can do it together. We are the they that people think about when they think of Milwaukee's philanthropists. We are the ones who can move the needle on our annual campaign in a way that nobody else is equipped to do. Raising over $5.3 million for the Israel emergency campaign in just a few months, thanks to so many of you in this room. It's proof that we have the resources and the will. We have the will and we have the commitment. With the holidays and the October 7th anniversary quickly approaching, Tanya and I are confident that with your help, we will rise to the challenge. And I have to say, I was talking at the cocktail hour with a couple of people that I had yet to meet, and one of the women said to me, "So you're the one that comes out to ask for money, right?" And I said, "Yes." And she said, "Well, I would like to talk to you. Will you make sure that you talk to me?" And I said, "My night is made." So I just want to let all of you know that Tanya and I are very happy to meet and get to know many of you, all of you, during this year. So we will rise to the challenge of creating the community that we not only want, but so rightfully deserve. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Tanya and Susan. What a night. So much emotion and compassion, so much still to learn, so much to think about. For me, I keep going back to Susan's message of resiliency. We must navigate these challenges and overcome these obstacles together. We have each other, and I'm so thankful. It gives me hope and the belief that we will emerge stronger.
A year ago, it was obviously a singular and horrible moment, and Sharon and I made the decision to make a contribution to the Israel Emergency Fund equal to our annual commitment at that time. And we decided this morning that we're going to carry that commitment forward into this year and add that to our annual commitment, and hoping maybe some other people will be able to do the same. Thank you.
On behalf of Janie, Mike, and Sharon, I I want to thank you for spending your evening with us. I want to thank the Federation staff for putting together this wonderful evening, and thank you to Tanya and Susan for being our campaign leaders at such a critical time. I know your time is precious. We are grateful that you have chosen to share it with us. More than anything, we are thankful that you have chosen to give so generously of yourself in every way to our Jewish community. Wishing all of you a Shana Tova, a sweet and happy New Year. Have a good night.